The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Teamsters in Los Angeles extend picket lines to an Amazon location in New York. The issues: better pay and safer working conditions. Meanwhile, a Harvard graduate student union launching a strike. And today on the show, SEIU Local 105 in Colorado, and our independent labor voice, Tom Buffenbarger, will be joining us. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 29th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have 2 guests joining us on the show today. We're going to kick things off with Andy Jacob. Who's Andy Jacob? Well, he is the Chief of Staff for the 8,000-plus members of Service Employees Union Local 105 in the state of Colorado. SEIU105.org. SEIU105.org. And the first thing we're going to talk about is this crazy law. They call it the Labor Peace Act. Goes back about 80 years, and it requires 2 elections. Not 1, but 2 elections to form a union. The first one calling for a simple majority. The second one, 75%. 75%. He's going to explain what's going on. Like I say, this has been in effect for decades, and the governor, who's a Democrat, vetoed it. The legislature wants it to happen. The people want it to happen. The governor says no. Now, he's on his way out, and I'm sure they're lining up to see what the next governor is going to do. He's going to talk about all of that, and also the corporations, billionaire-backed corporations that have pretty much ramped up their war on workers, not just in Colorado, but all around the country, to make sure this so-called Labor Peace Act stays in Colorado. Once again, the website is SEIU105.org. Later in the show, I'm going to check in with our independent labor voice on the show. That would be Tom Buffenbarger, former general president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, which is one of the many proud sponsors of America's Workforce. First thing we're going to talk about is the continuing strike at a ammunition depot, Lake City, Independence, Missouri, where IAM members make the munitions for the U.S. Armed Forces, which they need right now. Once again, we're talking about a company, Olin Corporation, that is just not coming to the table with a fair and decent offer. And this is a company that's getting a lot of subsidies, like $53 million in state and local subsidies. We'll talk about that, and we're going to talk about mergers in the airline industry, which have been going on for decades, and we've seen a whole lot of bankruptcies over the years as well. A little history lesson here from Tom, but the merger now being discussed is American and United, 2 giant airlines. And if this happens, they will control, it would be like United American. They would control over 50% of airline traffic. Sounds like a monopoly, doesn't it? So Tom is going to talk about that and more as our second guest right here on the show. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Amazon Teamsters at DAX7 in Los Angeles have extended the picket lines from their unfair labor practice strike to the company's DBK4 location in Queens, New York. It's interesting how they label these warehouses. Well, the DAX7 drivers They joined Teamsters Local 396 to fight for better pay and safer working conditions. This was last month. Well, last week, Amazon illegally retaliated against them by canceling the contract with their delivery service partner, DSP Next Stop. Comment here from Randy Corrigan. Randy's been on the show a couple of times. He's director of the Teamsters Amazon division. He's a true fighter. This is what Randy said. Amazon's callous termination show just how little this company values the hard work that these drivers do every day and agitates workers all over the country to fight. These drivers are Teamsters, so they can fight back. The workforce and our union will make Amazon feel the same pain that drivers do when Amazon fires them with no regard for how they're going to support their families. Amazon workers will keep organizing until they have the protections they all deserve. Sarah Venegas is an Amazon Teamster out of DAX7. This is what Sarah says. Every Amazon driver knows that our DSPs, these are the delivery service partners, can be cut at any time. That's why we organize with the Teamsters to fight for real job security. Amazon thinks we'll shut up and go away. But guess what? We're not going anywhere. We'll fight tooth and nail for justice at this company. Now, the retaliation against the drivers follows Amazon's decision to do the exact same thing to 100 members of Teamsters Local 804 at the DBK4 facility last September. The terminations there sparked a movement in New York City to pass the Delivery Protection Act, which would require Amazon and other last-mile providers to directly hire workers who deliver in the 5 boroughs. Latrice Johnson is one of the Teamsters at DBK4. Latrice says, Amazon tried to silence us the same way in the dead of night. Zero warning. We know what it's like for Amazon to try and throw you out on the street. Amazon is a horrible company, no matter where in the country you are. But being a Teamster, well, that means solidarity through direct action everywhere. Now, when you take a look across the country, 10,000 Amazon workers have organized with the Teamsters at 13 facilities. Amazon Teamsters are demanding a union contract that raises wages, protects their safety, improves benefits, and guarantees job security. And they should get all of that. The company is making a lot of money. Harvard's Graduate Student Union, HGSU, they're affiliated with the United Auto Workers. They have launched a strike after more than a year of contract negotiations with the university that failed to produce an agreement. The workers began picketing last Tuesday morning after a final bargaining session the night before yielded little movement on the core issues in dispute. The union has identified wages, non-citizen worker protections, and third-party arbitration in harassment and discrimination cases as its central demands. The union told members in an email to expect to be on the picket line. The strike halts teaching and research duties all across the university. And union leaders signaled that the action could continue indefinitely. Not the time to strike when the classes are about to end, right? You know, we're in the home stretch of our Workers' Memorial Day series now, and today's story comes from 2005, a refinery explosion in Texas that the petrochemical industry is still reckoning with some 20 years later. Well, it wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was a culture of cost-cutting that made this catastrophe inevitable. I got to thank our friends at the National Labor Office at Blue Cross and Blue Shield for making this segment possible. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross's Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families and for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. March 23rd, 2005, Texas City, Texas. A series of explosions ripped through the BP refinery, the third largest in the country, killing 15 workers and injuring 180 more. Investigators would later call it the worst industrial accident in America since 1990. What made it devastating wasn't just the explosion. It was everything that led up to it. Years of internal warnings, ignored safety audits, a corporate culture that cut budgets and accepted risk. Workers in trailers were placed too close to a vent stack that should have been replaced long before. While the U.S. Chemical Safety Board issued 26 safety recommendations, OSHA levied what was then one of the largest fines in its history, and the refining industry was forced to reckon with the difference between personal safety, preventing slips and falls, and process safety, preventing catastrophic failures. So, those 15 workers deserved a company that knew the difference. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go to SEIU Local 105 in the state of Colorado and talk about the Labor Peace Act, that and a whole lot more from the Chief of Staff. Back in a few minutes, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. So the question is this: is it right to work or is it not right to work? Very interesting thing happening in Colorado. They've been trying to change it. It's a one-of-a-kind law that's almost right to work. And joining us as our featured guest today is Andy Jacob. Now, we've discussed this with the California AFL-CIO. Andy is the Chief of Staff of SEIU Local 105. The website is SEIU105.org. Andy, let's get into this, but first tell me a little bit about yourself. You know, we based this show out of Northeastern Ohio for a number of years. We had it at Local 17, Ironworkers Local 17, and now I do this out of my home. But I understand you got some relatives in Northeastern Ohio. You lived in the Cleveland area. Talk to me about that and your union journey, if you don't mind. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, I thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity and the time to be able to talk about, this crazy law. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a crazy law. I was born in Oregon and spent time in Toledo. Then my dad's job moved us out to Indianapolis. And then in 95, came and moved back into Cleveland area, into Strongsville. And my parents have lived there ever since. Strong roots in Northeast Ohio, strong roots in the Midwest. Just have a lot of connection to the unions and to the working class, just from the way that I was raised and from all my all my family members. My grandfather was tool and die union. My grandmother was a lunch lady union. My other grandfather was a secretary treasurer for IBW in Toledo. Strong connection to unions and quite a different sort of union culture that I was raised in than what I experienced working in Colorado. And I think this law that we're going to talk about this morning is one of the reasons why that exists in Colorado, in my opinion.
Yeah, in Colorado, for the most part, it may be not as union as, say, Ohio or Pennsylvania, certainly not New York, but it seems to be the governor there doesn't seem to understand what unions are all about. And I want to talk about that. Well, let me pick up about SEIU 105. 8,000 members. Is that pretty accurate then?
Yeah, so we are SEIU Local in Colorado. There's two SEIU Locals in Colorado. There's ours that does private sector. So we represent home care workers, healthcare workers, janitors, security officers, Kaiser Permanente workers, clinicians, mental health workers, parking attendants, security officers. I'm sure I'm missing some because we represent both property services and healthcare members. We have been very active and very engaged in issues-based political work and driving material change for workers' lives. So the minimum wage campaign and work that's happened in the state, that was something that SEIU 105 was at the forefront of, along with paid family leave and paid sick. And obviously we did that with a large coalition of other unions and other community organizations and faith-based organizations. We've taken a leadership role for many years now and really trying to push the envelope around workers' rights and what it means to be someone who is for workers' rights and what it means to be a good Democrat in the state, what it means to be a good progressive in the state. When I first moved out to Colorado almost 20 years ago, it was okay to not be right on workers' issues. And unfortunately, we've entered into this new phase where rhetorically we've got everybody saying the right things about workers and supporting workers and pro-union and labor friendly and all the things, right? But then when it goes to putting your money where your mouth is and actually delivering material change for workers and for folks who are trying to fight for and form a union, we're just not seeing it happen. I think that's actually representative of a lot of what we're seeing all over the country in regards to the Democratic Party and sort of like this tension that is existing within it right now. And I boil that down to, I don't think you can serve two masters. I don't think as the Democratic Party, you can't serve the rich and the wealthy and the billionaires and the working class. Our needs and what we want are diametrically opposed. You can't do something good for billionaires and expect that to be good for workers. It's just not going to happen. And the way the billionaires have absorbed so much power and influence and money and have tipped the scale so far in their balance, anything that you do for workers does end up hurting their bottom line. But you know what? Their bottom line's enormous. They've got plenty of room to be able to give a little that would go a long ways for our folks. So we've been working very hard to sort of change that dynamic in the state. The Worker Protection Act is a vehicle that we've been using to drive material change for people's lives because it will fundamentally make it easier for workers to form a union in the state, and it will make it so that unions have more power. And when unions have more power, workers have more power, and we deliver legislative outcomes that actually improve people's lives. And it goes back to the minimum wage and paid sick and paid family leave that I was referencing. Kind of made it my mission in Colorado to change those dynamics. I remember the first Christmas I came home from getting my job at SEIU. All of my uncles thought I was like a hero. They're like, you're bringing the union out to Colorado. You're bringing labor values out to Colorado. That's great, right? Like all they saw of Colorado was what would be shown on like a Denver Broncos football playoff game, right? Like they just think it snows here all the time and it's like the Wild West, right? And so it was, it was neat, right? So I'm trying to bring those values into the state, and it's a state full of hardworking people who just want to get by and want to feel good about their lives and their future, and don't want to have to worry about keeping the lights on, and don't want to have to worry about making the decision whether or not you're going to pay this bill or that bill. Laws like the Labor Peace Act hold people back, and they shouldn't be holding people back. I think by 2026, in a state like Colorado that's triple blue, Democratic trifecta, has been a Democratic trifecta for 8+ years. Like these should be simple things to get taken care of, but that's just not the case. It's just not the case.
Well, the Democrats have changed dramatically, and a lot of that is blamed on Citizens United. which was a Supreme Court ruling well over a decade ago. And what it did, it opened up the coffers, and unions, well, they have diminished ranks. They can't raise the money the corporations can. The Democrats have gone to the corporations, and the corporations, well, let's be honest, they're not union friendly. I mean, that's what that's all about. But this Worker Protection Act, I need you to explain this because when I talked to Dennis Doherty, and I talked to other people in Ohio, and Dennis, of course, is with the Colorado AFL-CIO, and I explain that to people here. Nobody can understand how it happened, why it even happened, and why you need the Worker Protection Act. Why don't you tell our listeners what this is all about?
I'll do my best, because anytime I explain this to one of my colleagues from around the country, other labor leaders, they're like, they don't believe me. They're like, no way. There's no way that's true. Right? That law, that's real, that's legal. There's no way, right? Because it's so absurd on face. This is a law that came about, in the 40s. It's got a very clever title, right? The Labor Peace Act. Who doesn't want to have labor peace, right? Like, who doesn't think that that's a good thing? But it's absolutely Orwellian, right? Like, the only thing it was securing peace for was for the corporations and the companies that were trying to hold workers back and trying to hold them down. So the law forces, and this is like a one-of-a-kind thing, right? So Colorado's very proud of us being innovative and one of a kind, right? So I guess here's another sort of one of a kind things coming out of our state. This forces folks who have already won their union, either through going through the very hard fought battle of a first election, or in some circumstances, we're able to have an agreement with an employer that allows us to have card check neutrality, whatever that mechanism is to certify their union happens. And then after that, they have to go through a second election in order to be able to secure not the guarantee of this, but just the ability to negotiate around a labor security clause. Essentially, the ability for anyone who is represented by the union to have to pay some sort of dues or fees to the union to provide resources for the union to negotiate contracts, to represent people in discipline issues, to work for the interests of the folks who are a part of the union and the members who are paying dues into the union. And this second election, it's kind of the definition of undemocratic. There's certain benchmarks that you have to hit in order to pass the election. So you need to have 50% of the eligible voters have to vote. And of those 50%, 75% have to vote in the affirmative for having won the Labor Peace Act election. I have had some fun with that and asked politicians, like, hey, would any of you be elected if you had to do this? Would any of you be in office if this was the election makeup you had to go through? And they're all like, no. Well, then why do workers have to do that? Right?
Right.
If it's too high a threshold for you to be a politician, to have all of this power, to be making all these decisions about our lives, but it's not too high of a bar for a worker who's literally just fighting for a better life. That's all they want. They just want some dignity and respect on the job and a voice in what's happening. We know from history and the reality that when workers go through that organizing drive, 9 times out of 10, the boss is extremely hostile, and they employ every trick in the book to dissuade people from forming that union. A lot of times they break the law, but the laws are so weak and the penalties associated with those laws hit people so far down the road that they don't even care, right? And so I liken it to people being taken through psychological warfare because their livelihoods get threatened, their jobs get threatened, managers take advantage. They might say, hey, Flash, I know your wife's sick. It'd be a real shame if we lost our health insurance, wouldn't it? It'd be a real shame for you, right? And that's crossing a line, but it's using psychological warfare and terror to just scare people out of doing that, right? And so you've got a situation in Colorado where we've got people, they go through that fire, they go through that crucible, they win that first election, and then they have to go through that right over again, getting the same psychological warfare tactics employed with them, the same threats from the boss, the same fear from the boss. And it has a real chilling effect on union organizing. I don't think you can take a look at the union density in the state of Colorado. We're at 5.9% right now. And with the straight face, say that this law hasn't had an overall chilling effect on union organizing in the state, right? If you take a look at other non-right to work states that are very similar to us in the demographic makeup, political makeup, and some of the business environment and the business atmosphere. And they're clocking in 10, 11, 12% union density. So it's clear that this holds people back, and this doesn't make any dang sense. And we've got a governor who likes to lessen regulations, who's always talking about lessen regulations, always talking about let's keep government out. That's more of a libertarian streak, but apparently this law is okay. Let's have total government infringement in the lives of working people. That seems to be just okay.
Amazing. I think Alabama has higher union density
and that hurts.
And they are a full-fledged right to work state.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Just crazy.
And they don't have a Democratic trifecta, and they haven't had one in place for the last 8 years. And they also don't have a bunch of Democrats who, frankly, have been running on union values, have been running on labor values, and have been using our people and the fact that unions are wildly popular and the folks that we represent are wildly popular as sort of to boost their credentials for the electorate. But when it comes to passing laws that are going to be to the benefit of workers, we're just not seeing it happen. And in fact, we just had a law last week that now means that farm workers are able to access overtime at 56 hours a week instead of 48. 48 already should have been unacceptable, but now it's at 56. And we have Democrats voting and driving and making that happen. Rhetorically, again, they're out there saying all the right things, singing the praises of workers, singing the praises of labor, talking about how they're our partners. But when it comes to legislating and it comes to passing laws that will deliver either good things for people's lives or bad things for people's lives, we just haven't seen them step up to the plate the way that they need to. And especially not the way they need to in 2026, where we've got all these things happening and Trump into office and a war in the Middle East. People are reaching their wits' end, and they're ready to fight back, and they're ready to have a difference in their lives.
Andy, let's talk about the fight back. Andy Jacob is our featured guest on the show today. He serves as Chief of Staff of SEIU Local 105. That's one of the many unions. They're about 8,000 strong. One of the many unions that are trying to change the dynamics there when it comes to so-called labor peace. We'll continue with Andy right after this on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Andy Jacob is our featured guest on the show today. He serves as Chief of Staff of SEIU Local 105 in Colorado, SEIU105.org is a website. We're talking about the Worker Protection Act. It's a bizarre situation in Colorado. No other state has what they have. They're not a right-to-work state, but they act like one. And they're trying desperately to turn the dynamics around, but the governor, who is a Democrat, doesn't see it that way, at least not on the workers' point of view. So, Andy, fill me in here. And I remember talking to Dennis Doherty of the Colorado AFL-CIO about the fact that the last session in the legislature, he vetoed it. You brought it again to the floor, And he's already saying that it's a no-go. This is ridiculous, but it's not stopping you. Talk to me about this whole process. And I guess this is it for him this year. He's done. Is that right?
Yeah. So he did veto the bill last year. We worked very hard to see if we could have a negotiated settlement, but we just couldn't get there. And we decided that we were going to bring the bill back again this year in the same form. And I think we as a coalition have also made a decision that we're just going to keep bringing this bill back until it gets signed. We, as labor in the state of Colorado, are in an untenable position having this bill on the books, having this law on the books. We just can't grow the way that unions need to grow. We can't deliver the results for working people that need to be delivered in this moment. And so we are just going to keep pushing this until we get a breakthrough on it. And this is not unfamiliar territory for anybody who's in the working class or has been a part of the union. We have to fight for every single thing that we've gotten in this country. Not a single thing has ever been given to working people in this country. It's always been fought for. Colorado has a long history of fighting for workers' rights. And we have the massacres in Ludlow where people literally died and put them and their kids' lives on the line to fight for a better life for themselves. And so we're viewing this push to get rid of the Worker Protection Act, a rallying cry for all workers in the state and all progressive organizations in the state and all unions in the state to fight and drive to deliver a different change for workers. And yes, Governor Polis, this is the last ledge session he's going to be in Colorado. Again, he's already telling us that he's going to veto this. He was not very happy when he found out this bill is coming back around, but we don't care. It's not our job to make him happy. Our job is to represent the people in the state who are fighting for a better life. Getting rid of this law will absolutely give people a better life in the state of Colorado. We know that it will increase union density. And we know that when you increase union density, it's more money in people's pockets, regardless of if you're in the union or not. Life outcomes increase. Places with higher union density, people are literally happier, right? Like if you literally want to make people happier, you can increase union density. It's a lot of the issues and problems that we're facing as a country. If we just had higher union density, which would mean that workers had more power and more agency in the democratic process of our country, it would be better for everyone. Because if it's good for workers, it's good for 99% of us, 99.999% of us, right? So we're just going to continue to drive on this. I would say the rich and the wealthy and the corporations and the billionaires, they've got a party. The Republican Party, they don't hide from the fact that that's who they represent and that's who they work for. It's pretty refreshing. I don't have any confusion about where they're going to land on some of these pretty fundamental issues. And I think the Democratic Party is now struggling internally with where it's going to go. And I just fundamentally don't believe that you can serve two masters. You cannot serve the wealthy and the billionaires and the working class. And Democrats are going to have to choose a side. And my local, we're going to be driving some public accountability campaigns that are going to force people to choose a side and really clearly show the electorate in Colorado, where do these folks find themselves on the spectrum? Are they making decisions with the interest of you and your family at the forefront? Or are they making decisions with the interest of the billionaire class and the donor class and the people who have put them into power, right? And so we just really want to draw that stark line with folks and set ourselves up for the continued fight and the next governor. And, the next governor of Colorado is going through primaries right now. You're going to have a general election. Lots of opportunities for them to show which side they're on. Are they going to be with the people or are they going to be with the billionaires?
Well, that leads me to my next question. In the crop that are running to be your next governor in the state of Colorado, is there anybody supporting the Worker Protection Act?
We've had some meetings with folks, but no one has come out and publicly said that they will sign the bill and eliminate the second election and get the Worker Protection Act passed. We've heard every excuse in the book for why that hasn't happened yet. I think it's because the business community and the donor class in the state have made this their red line and the big boogeyman for them. In my wildest dreams, for us to go from 5.9% union density to 12% union density, it would take decades of organizing and decades of work and just tons and tons and tons of energy and time and effort put into that. So this notion that this law is going to change and then all of a sudden we're going to have 100% union density and there's going to be all these issues, it's just a false one. But It's caught a lot of traction with the people who are currently in power and the folks who are funding these elections. And so we've not seen action from these candidates. I'm hopeful that maybe they can see the light and they can understand that just rhetorically talking about good things for the working class and for unions isn't enough, and that passing laws like this absolutely have to be done and should be done.
Frankly, Andy, I'm a little surprised that the candidates that are vowing to be your next governor are not embracing unions, because unions right now, Gallup shows like a ridiculous amount of people supporting unions for all the right reasons, because they're not surviving under the current environment with inflation, with benefits being cut back. Sarah Nelson came forward just recently. Sarah heads the flight attendants union. She started a nonprofit that's designed to, tell people about unions, because a lot of them don't understand unions. They want to join a union, but they're scared to, the same kind of thing that's going on all across America right now. So a lot of that has to do with messaging. I don't know. I don't know what the next step is going to be. I have to salute you for your persistence. I mean, this governor is going to veto it, but it's not stopping you. And you have to maintain that attitude. Now, you speak on behalf of SEIU Local 105. Are the other unions taking that same approach?
Obviously, I can't speak for every single union, but I would say writ large, we're ready to fight. I think we've been ready to fight for a long time, and if we're not ready to fight now, in this moment, what else is it going to take? Like, what other areas of our society do we need to hit rock bottom before we're all gonna wake up and say, no, we're not dealing with that. No, we're not okay with data centers being put in our communities that don't have water. No, we're not okay with billionaires getting another tax cut. No, we're not okay with another war in the Middle East when you tell us that we can't fund universal health care for the people in this country, right? Like, I think that this country was built on people fighting for the rights that they believed in. There's nothing more democratic. There's nothing more American. There's nothing more patriotic than standing up and saying, no, I want to make a change, and I'm going to deliver as much change as I can for as many people as I can. And I think that's what unions represent. That's the fight that we try to take into these conversations, into these situations. I spent my entire career trying to convince people that water's wet and the sky is blue, and that, maybe putting more money in people's pockets is a good thing for them. Maybe giving them more rights is a good thing for them. Maybe these folks actually are smart enough to understand the things that they need, and we don't need people telling us these things, right? So it is surprising to me that the gubernatorial candidates haven't come around on this issue yet. There's a lot of reasons behind that. I will say, rhetorically, people are saying the right things, right? We got a lot of pro-union, a lot of pro-worker, a lot of pro-working families rhetoric out there. Unless that rhetoric starts delivering material change for people's lives, it's just going to breed cynicism. And I can tell you that cynicism with the Democratic Party, with all the parties right now, is at an all-time high. Because you can't just constantly tell people you're going to do something for them and then turn right around and do nothing for them and stab them in the back, right? And not deliver, right? And people, we're smart now, right? So like my own personal experience, 9/11 happened when I was in high school. The first war in the Middle East happened. I had people who I knew who went over to the Middle East, and it was part of that war, and they came back and just weren't right. And at the same time as that's happening, we're starting to learn about sort of the reality of that war. And then the Great Recession happens, and we've got all of these people who lose their homes, and no one was held accountable who was in a position of power. Not a single one of those bankers who ruined who knows how many people's lives faced any consequence for that whatsoever, right? And then we have COVID, and we see what that does to people. And now we've got Trump getting elected for a second time, and there's everything that's been happening in those last, so I'm 41. More than half my life has just been spent in total turmoil. And a lot of us who are in this age bracket are like, no, I'm not doing this, right? Like, I've got 3 kids, a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And I literally can't imagine what their future is going to look like. I don't know what jobs are going to be available because of AI and automation. I don't know how to help prepare and plan for their future. And that's scary for me. And it's scary for a lot of people I know who are my age. And I've decided to, and I'm trying to help and encourage and be a leader in the space. I'm not scared of that. I'm mad. I'm infuriated by it. And I'm going to use that to drive my work personally, to drive the organization's work, and to drive people around us, to just get people to stand up and say, no, we're not doing that anymore, right? Like this statistic drives me insane. And I don't like using statistics because I don't actually think they move people. I think stories and the reality of the world move people. But at the height of the robber barons, 0.0001% owned 4% of the nation's wealth. Today, that same cadre of people owns 12%. So, like, this system is just firing on all cylinders for the way it's supposed to for these folks, for the very, 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 very small percentage of the population who's just grown insanely and wildly wealthy on the backs of all of us. And no, just no, that's not okay. Like, no one should be okay with that. And I don't think people are. And, I don't want to look, it's okay to have rich people in the country. It's fine, but it's not okay to have so obscenely rich people in the country that it's strangling the rest of us. It's suffocating the rest of us. Like, there is a balance to be made, and the country's done that before, so we can do it again. It's not like we're asking to do things that are so radical and so just out of the sphere, right? Like, we've had reasonable tax rates before. We've had like real investment in a social safety net. Like, we can go back to that, and we can do better. We can do better than we were before. And I think that this moment of just great fear and uncertainty and also anger is providing an opportunity for us to establish a new social contract, to establish new expectations from the elites and from billionaires and from the people who are in positions of power. And it starts with saying, no, we're not going to deal with this crap anymore, and we're not going to handle it. And no, just saying nice things about unions and workers is not enough. You have to do something for workers and for unions and for working people.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Workforce. I truly, truly enjoyed talking with you on this show today, and I want to invite you back because this has to change, to your point. And you think about, this is the year we're celebrating this country's 250th birthday. And you go back to the 1700s. What's going on in America? They were upset with British rule, and they made something about it. That's why we are here today, because of the colonists at that time. And there's got to be a breaking point when you think about what you just said. Enough is enough. And, to your point on the parties, I've been following a race in Nebraska, Dan Osborne, and he's fed up with the Democrats and the Republican Party, so he's running as an independent. And you know what? He's doing pretty darn well.
Yeah.
He's getting a whole lot of contributions from the people that you're talking about on this podcast, because the parties, they're not listening to us anymore. They're not. But you know what? We got to do something. And hey, it starts right now, right here on America's Workforce. So thank you so much for your time, Andy. Andy Jacob, Chief of Staff, SEIU Local 105. Here's a website you want to go to, SEIU105.org. Stay safe. Solidarity, brother. Keep in touch with us, okay?
Thanks so much. Really appreciated the opportunity to be here with everyone this morning. And I'll just leave y'all. There's no time like the present to start fighting back and organizing. So if you've never done it before, just start it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our independent labor voice, Tom Buffenbarger, will be joining us. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
It takes LIUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LIUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to Tommy Buffenbarger right now. Tom, retired general president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. GoIAM.org is a national website. If you go there, you can read about a strike that's going on in Independence, Missouri. And this is a continuing strike at the Lake City Army Ammunition Depot, where IAM members make munitions for the U.S. Armed Forces, which are in play right now. Tommy, welcome back to the show. What's going on here? I'm going to turn it over to you because I'm sure you know this plant very, very well.
I do know this plant. It's some great workers. I believe there's 1,300 workers there. They produce all the ammunition used by our armed forces in carrying out their duties. I don't think I have to remind any listener we're currently in a war with Iran. Thus, the production that comes from this plant's excruciatingly important. We're also giving aid and sustenance to our friends in Ukraine. We've got military actions underway in the Caribbean, especially with Venezuela. We've been using up, Flash, a lot of the stockpile of this country's munitions to where we've dipped into the strategic amount of ammunition kept on hand for our own country's defense. And then it comes time to negotiate a contract, and the employer in this case, Olin Corporation, wants to play Uncle Scrooge. Now, they're getting government contracts to ramp up production to meet our needs, both internally and externally. Right now, in this administration, money doesn't seem to be an object in order to produce munitions, but they don't want to share any of the profits that come from this with the people who actually make it. Now, I want to just explain what an ammunition plant does because the IAM represents several different ammunition manufacturers. They're very dangerous jobs. All these plants are spread out over a lot of acreage. They don't put all the buildings and all the production close together or in one building in case an accident happens. And since we're dealing with highly explosive material, that's why the separation is there. These people go in and they do their job with dedication and precision every day. And to see, in a funny kind of way, the U.S. government stand behind the employer in denying a fair wage, a decent contract to these employees is just unfathomable. I think this is going to be a tough strike. It's going to be a long one, and it only serves because of corporate greed. It serves to the detriment of our nation. If you think about every time you see a newscast and you see soldiers fighting and shouldering their battle gear, is firing IAM-made munition of some sort in defense of this country. We should be proud of them who make it, and we should be contacting our congressmen and senators to put pressure on the corporation to come up with a fair contract.
I'm going to do a shout out here to IAM Local 778. That's in Independence, Missouri. And hopefully they're staying strong. And I know they're staying strong, but I just want to give them some words of encouragement here because, going on strike is very difficult. And I'm reading about, they're trying to negotiate a fair and reasonable collective bargaining agreement. To your knowledge, Tom, are they very far apart at this stage or what?
The company has come back to the table. The last offer was rejected, so the contract continues. Some of the key issues, besides a decent wage, which they have earned, it's the scheduling of the employees. They really need to hire more people. We have people working 12-hour days or more, 7 days a week to try to keep up with demand. You don't want tired people, exhausted people working at a munitions plant because any mistake can literally blow up at any minute. We want people to have rest. We want them to earn a good wage, have a long career at that plant. That's another issue there is a high turnover rate because of how the employees there are treated. These are things they're striking for, and rightfully so. I just hope that we're able to resolve this thing and for the benefit of the whole country and, ironically, for the rest of the world, is that we have what we need ready in case we ever need it.
You mentioned the money they're getting from taxpayers. I'm reading $53 million in state and local subsidies. With that investment, we're talking about a contractor-operated facility that obviously is making a whole lot of money, but they don't want to spread any of that over the workers.
Line. Olin Corporation is a huge chemical manufacturer. It's been around for a long time. People recognize the names that have been associated with it in the past, such as Winchester and U.S. Repeating Arms and Browning. They were all owners of this at some point in our country's history. They provided not only the ammunition, but the weapons used during, for instance, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Amazing. All right, let's talk about the airline industry. And I'll tell you, this is like a broken record here because I remember Pan Am. I remember TWA. I'm showing my age here. These airlines are gone. I remember when they deregulated the airline industry. I think that was back in the late 70s. That was supposed to be really good. Well, everybody said deregulation is going to be good. And then all of a sudden, these airlines, well, they couldn't compete anymore. Fast forward to today, I'm hearing about American and United Airlines possibly merging. And I also saw on the machinist website about Spirit. Now, Spirit Airlines was supposed to go under, but I'm hearing now the government might bail them out. Tom, I'm sure you've been watching all of this. Can you unwind some of this for our listeners?
It's hard to keep up with now, but you're right about the broken record part. I believe it was 1979 when we deregulated the airline industry, and that was a code word for destroy it. We were all promised, and I remember this so clearly, we were all promised more choices, cheaper flights, better aircraft, more airports, so there'd be more access to the country. And what occurred was fewer airlines, higher prices, closed airports. We all know what was once a fun adventure. If you had to fly, that was something. Now it's become a dreaded experience where you're crammed into a cattle car, as many human souls as they can put in a plane, and to get you from point A to point B. Well, in the ensuing years, airlines have either gone out of business or went bankrupt and came back and went bankrupt again. The song goes on. And that's what's happened with Spirit, is they've tried many times to keep this low-cost carrier alive. So when it just couldn't do it anymore, and I am sure the airline itself did its best to make it in this world, but when you have wars of choice, that create shortages of fuel, which an airline needs. And let me explain how that works. For every penny increase in the price of jet fuel, the rule of thumb is it costs the airlines $100 million. That's cumulative. Every penny translates to $100 million in increased price. You take a struggling carrier, and with the huge increase in the price of fuel, that alone was enough to drive the last nail in. Well, then comes the government, says, we're not going to let you go under. We're going to come up with $500 million and bail you out. Well, the thing is, the government wants to take up to 90% ownership in the airline. I've seen this story before when Eastern Airlines folded.
Uh-huh.
And they had a popular route called the Eastern Shuttle that went up and down the East Coast like every hour. Wherever you were, you could get on an Eastern plane, like a bus, and go to wherever you had to along the coast, the I-95 corridor. Well, when Eastern folded, a guy named Donald Trump purchased the Eastern Shuttle and was going to save it and save all those jobs because the city, Newark, New Jersey, LaGuardia in New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, all these cities used it a lot. That lasted long enough for him to realize when the first maintenance bill came due, he didn't know you had to maintain airplanes. He didn't know you had to work on the engines. He didn't know what the price of fuel was going to be and how that impacted things. And so it all folded and went away. Just an example of when the government gets involved and people have great ideas without a plan. Then with United and American, the two largest carriers in the United States, having discussions about merger, if that were to happen, if the government were to permit it, that's over 50% of the airline traffic in any given day would be controlled by one airline. And all it takes is one hiccup someplace to have a very adverse impact upon the flying public and how we do business in the United States and the rest of the world. This is a bad idea. We should go back to that promise from 1979. We're going to create more airlines so there's more choice and better service and more access to the flying public. This will be a stranglehold on all of that. So it affects jobs. It affects communities because when mergers occur and you have fewer airlines, it has a deep impact on communities by a lot of times closing down parts of airports, which are funded and supported by the public. So there needs to be a lot better plan put in place. And I'm hoping the government at the end of the day looks at this proposal and says, no. That's the best thing that can happen to the people of this country.
Tom, when you see these mergers happen, and so many have happened over the years, the first thing, and you touched on this, the first thing, jobs disappear. And these are good paying jobs. These are machinist union jobs. Speculate for me, if you will. How many could be gone if this goes ahead? If United and American join together, percentage-wise, the amount, what do you think could happen here?
The real possibility would be the loss, and I may be understating this, but it could be 25% of the jobs between the two carriers. That's a lot of jobs. Each carrier has 40,000, 50,000 employees in this country. And this doesn't just affect the union workers. This affects the management workers as well. You would see a deep contraction and the loss of really good jobs in people who serve the American public. They may be working for a private employer, but it's a public benefit they're taking care of. This is what happens. And when they do that, profits at the airlines increase. They don't want to share it with anybody. And if anything, they would look for some other merger opportunity to keep building to the point that we get to a monopoly. A little history on United Airlines used to be Boeing. Boeing created that airline to use the planes they were building in Seattle. Their first contract was delivering U.S. mail. Now, this is before the jet age. The government back then understood we can't let a monopoly occur, and so they forced Boeing to spin off what became United Airlines. And now we're taking two big giant carriers and say, oh, we're going to let you marry up and become one airline. United American, that would be the name of it. Just think about that.
Yeah, and they would control 50%, at least 50%.
Over 50% of the flights in this country each day.
Wow, scary stuff. We'll see what happens here. I love talking to you because of that little nugget of history there about Boeing and United. That's pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff. Tommy Buffenberger, our independent labor voice, former general president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. You take care. We'll talk to you next month. Okay, brother?
Okay. Thanks. The best to you and your listeners, class.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to check in with IBEW Local 601 in the state of Illinois. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.